Welcome to Her Life Unscripted podcast, inspiring burnt out, stressed out, and stretched thin women to embrace the unscriptedness of life. Hosted by Anna Osborne.
Hello, ladies, and welcome to Her Life Unscripted, episode 71. I am your host, Anna Osborne, and I am so excited to be here with all of you today. I just came back from a 4-day little getaway with my husband, and I just feel so refreshed. It's fantastic. And so I'm just really excited to be here with all of you today and connect and slow down and just spend some time seeing what you guys are up to. I have to say that, being away from my kids for 4 days was joyful. I'm not going to lie. It was great. But what was so funny is that the first day that my husband and I are together, we go to dinner, and the first 20 minutes of dinner, we're kind of sitting there and we're just making kind of casual conversation. And then we kind of both realize at the same time that we actually can have a conversation because there aren't two small children interrupting us every time we try and talk. And it was the coolest thing because it evolved into just talking about what's going on in life and where we're both at and the good, the bad, the ugly. And then also afterwards going to another restaurant for a glass of wine and some dessert and finding even more things to talk about. So I am very refreshed and just very appreciative that I was able to have that little time away because I know that it is not easy to find those pockets of time, especially when, not only having kids, but also busy schedules. Everybody has demands on their time, and it can feel hard to break out of that and be able to kind of, turn towards that relationship that is so important to you, whether it is a friendship or a partnership or family, and be able to really give that the time and attention that it deserves. So I am back, and let's see. What else can I update you guys on? Want to let you know that this is obviously our last show for the month of August, and I actually will be going on hiatus for the month of September. I have been nervous about doing it because my weekly just connection with all of you is so important to me. But as you all know, the Shine Retreat for Women is coming up at the end of September, and I'm also moving offices this next weekend. And so between those two things, there is an exorbitant amount of energy that will be needed to kind of facilitate all of those things. And I want to make sure that I am not spreading myself so thin so that either you guys get the short end of the stick and I'm just throwing shows together, because that really is something I do not want to do. And I also, obviously, Mari and I have put so much energy into the Shine Retreat, and I want to make sure that there's no, conflict of energy. Is that even a term? But of pulling away from what I really want to feed into there, especially the last month, because it has been, 10 months that we've been working on this project. And so to finally see it come to fruition is exciting. And also I want to make sure that there is every last little bit of energy is put towards that. So I am nervous about not doing any shows in September because you guys are all such loyal listeners, and I'm doing it with some cautiousness, but I'm also trusting that it is the right flow of energy. So today will be our last show for the month of August. And then after that, our next show will be right after the Shine Retreat. So I am just super excited to be, making that decision. And as hard as it is, it also feels like the right thing to do, which actually ties us in very closely with today's topic. As you know, for the month of August, we have been focusing on this idea of change and transitions, and this idea of, do we have a choice when this is all happening to us? And if we do have a choice, how do we make that choice, and just all of those components. And so today we are talking about this concept of compare and despair. And it's actually one that came to me, that I heard somebody referring to a couple months ago. And I thought, oh my gosh, I want to learn more about that. I want to share more about it. And so it's just been kind of sitting there in my journal of show ideas. And I was kind of looking back through that the other day, thinking about this week's show and doing my prep work and realizing that I really wanted to dive in and use it within this month's kind of theme, because I think that whenever we are in a place of transition, the worst thing that we can do is compare ourselves to others, because every time we compare ourselves with others, we have this, experience of compare and despair. And honestly, with making kind of the decision to go on hiatus for a month, I thought, oh my gosh, I've been putting this weekly show out for, almost, over a year now, almost a year and a half. And to just kind of go away for a month, what is that saying to, the folks that listen and how important they are to me? And I don't think other podcasters do this. And if they've done it, all of a sudden the comparison started, right? And the despair of, oh gosh, I'm really trying to be mindful of energy and the transitions that I'm going through and being able to honor those and the comparison started and the despair kicked in very, very quickly. And so I had to obviously take a step back and do what any good therapist does, which is practice what they preach, and realizing that I could take a step back and just hold the space, that it'll come back when we reconvene in October after the Shine Retreat. And it'll just be like one of those fluid friendships where you pick up right where you left off. And honestly, that is just a small example of this kind of phenomenon of compare and despair. And I think anytime we are in transition or change, we want to ground ourselves. And I mean that because we don't know what's coming around every corner, right? Especially when changes and transitions are happening to us and it feels like we have no say in it whatsoever. It can be really, really overwhelming. And so, my thought with it is thinking, okay, we want to ground ourselves when everything feels out of control. Perfectly normal. Right? Totally human nature, right? We want to encourage that piece. But what happens is when we start to ground ourselves, the best way to do that is by looking around to others. And unfortunately, when we look to others, we all of a sudden start figuring or looking to see where we measure up, right? Where do we fit into this? Because we don't feel like we're doing it right. Somebody else is doing it better. Somebody else is doing it looking more graceful, right? And the despair sets in. And so it's being able to figure out this natural tendency that we have when change is swirling all around us, which is to ground. That's a good natural tendency. But how do we kind of circumvent this automatic response to start comparing ourselves to others, therefore experiencing the letdown or the devastation when we see that somebody is doing it different than us? And us judging that different as them doing it right, us doing it wrong. And so that piece is really what we're talking about today. For many of you, you may know the Theodore Roosevelt quote, right? That comparison is the thief of joy. And I do believe that, right? That when we compare ourselves, it removes all the joy from our life because we're comparing it to somebody else's most shiny moment. And we've talked about that in the show about comparisons and how just worthless they are, right? They don't serve us to be any good. But this idea, this kind of, Teddy Roosevelt quote of comparison is the thief of joy, I want to take it one step farther because I believe that comparison is the thief of validation. It's the thief of grounding. Because it's not only that we're comparing, oh, I've got this great success. And then I see, Sally Smith next to me and her success is better. And so all of a sudden I've robbed myself of my joy. Obviously that happens, right? But the other side of it is the piece of when I am hurting, when I am overwhelmed, when I am stressed. If I then compare my struggle to somebody else's struggle, oftentimes I invalidate how big my struggle is for me. And that piece, I believe, is really, really significant because we talk about it in terms of this, don't compare yourself because you're going to be feeling good and that's just going to take away your good feeling because you're going to see somebody doing it better, quicker, faster, whatever. But the huge, huge concern for me is not only that, but then when we are hurting and we compare our struggle to somebody else's, we all of a sudden hugely, significantly invalidate that our struggle is worth notice. And friends, let me tell you, your struggle is worth notice. When you are hurting, you are deserving of validation, support, love, respect. You are not only accepted for your strengths, you are accepted for your weaknesses. And that in the relationships we build around us, the ones we choose, let me pause there for a second, right? Because there are relationships in our life that we don't choose. Some of us, some of you, some of us have relationships with family that are toxic. And you realize it isn't unconditional, right? I can only show up perfect. I can't show up human. And so in the relationships, the ones that we choose, you're deserving to have those relationships be unconditionally accepting for your struggle. And that when you are sharing your struggle and somebody says, oh my goodness, I know exactly how you feel. My second cousin, twice removed, who remarried a gal from, 8 states over, she had the same thing happen. I totally get it. That isn't helpful, right? And the problem is that comparison then is thrown in our face. And there's this assumption that whether it's verbalized or not, that is thrown to us that however somebody else handled it is how we're supposed to handle it. And for me, that feels extremely overwhelming because as great as I am in moments, I'm not going to handle my struggle the same as you. And that's okay, right? Neither of us are doing it wrong. But if we compare each other, ourselves to each other when it comes to our struggle, all we do is invalidate that ours is also significant. And this can happen even on a kind of a more surface level, right? You think about social media, and I know we're always talking about social media. It's like all social media does is talk about how bad social media is, right? Which is actually kind of a funny and ironically true because that is all social media talks about. But the truth is that this compare and despair happens at a subconscious level. Now, I don't know what the statistic is, and I could look it up and probably find it, but there is a statistic out there that when a young woman or adolescent looks at a fashion magazine with unrealistic, sizes and figures and six-pack abs and all these sorts of things, that when a adolescent or young adult or adult woman looks at that magazine, there is a notable drop in her body image, in her acceptance of her body. And they've researched this over and over, and that they say, they've got, again, statistics out there, which I can dig up and find and email me if you want me to send them over. But that in countries where there's no TV, right? That there is no fashion magazines, there isn't anything like that, that they notice higher rates of body satisfaction and positive body image in countries that don't have that social media kind of, influence. And that when they got that within their culture, there was marked differences in body image acceptance. And that happens at a subconscious level. Whereas when they do this research, the young girls and the women won't even necessarily be able to put their finger on why all of a sudden they're picking apart their bodies, but that it's, correlated with looking at images of other women and this unrealistic expectation of how they think they should then look. So if that's happening at a micro level, what happens when we're scrolling through social media, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Lord help us, right? When we're scrolling through those things, pretty much the only option is compare and despair or judgment. And the reason I say that is we're either looking through it and going, oh my gosh, look at how good she looks, or oh my gosh, look at how happy they look. Look at their vacation. Look at their, right? The list goes on. And woe is me. I'm hurting so much. I feel so all alone. Or we look at those other people who we're allegedly friends with on social media, but we don't even know how we know them. And we judge them. We criticize them. We cut them down in order to make ourselves feel better, which honestly is just another version of compare and despair. And so my encouragement to all of you today as we're talking is being able to at least add one more step in between hurting and comparing. And that one step can be positive affirmations, breath, counting to 10. It can be something very, very simple. But if you start to practice to have one step in between when you're hurting and looking for support and when you start comparing yourself to your struggle to somebody else's struggle, that one step in between can be amazingly grounding if we just get into the practice of it. And this isn't kind of a turnkey, start doing this today and all of a sudden you're cured sort of situation, right? This takes practice. And the only way that we can have change happen is if we bring it to the forefront. Because so much of what we do happens at just an automatic kind of primal autopilot part of our brain. And so if we don't know that we're doing it, we won't be able to change it. And so part of this is becoming acutely aware that we're doing it. And the best way to do it is to add one step in between. Right before we reach out to support, right before we reach for the phone to numb out by looking at our newsfeed, add a step. Adding a step will be a huge, huge difference in being able to step back from compare and despair. And the more that you bring it to the forefront, the more you're able to not rob yourself of the invalidation that your struggle is worthy of support, love, care, respect. And that really is my hope for all of you. So that is it for our show today. I want to thank all of you for just listening and being such an awesome, awesome support and just an amazing community of women. If you are interested in attending the Shine Retreat for Women, I so encourage you to head over and register. It is happening September 29th through October 1st in the beautiful Laguna Beach. And we have just you ladies that are attending are going to be so well taken care of. I can't even describe to you what Mari and I have done to be able to make sure that the whole weekend is spent focusing on you, being able to have time just to slow down, time to connect, and time to really work on changing the habits of giving to everyone else and leaving nothing for yourself. I so encourage you to register. I would love to see you there. And I also am going to preemptively thank you for being unconditionally kind for my decision to go on hiatus for the month of September. And I just am going to hold the space that all of you that are being called to attend the Shine Retreat will answer that call, because it is truly a place where you belong. And I can't wait to see you all there. Thank you so much for letting me into your worlds, into your hearts. And I can't wait to either see you in person at the end of September or speak to you in October when Her Life Unscripted comes back from our September hiatus. Take care, you guys. Bye-bye.
Want to learn about the latest retreats, workshops, and speaking events hosted by Anna? Head over to herlifeunscripted.com to get in on all the juicy details. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so we can continue to grow our amazing audience. Lastly, be sure and send in your voice feedback via the SpeakPipe app or to Anna@herlifeunscripted.com. We can't wait to hear from you.